fog that night was not normal. Thick as wet cotton, it covered the trees of the Shizuoka Mountains like a living blanket. Muffling sound, footsteps, breathing. Noriko held her flashlight tightly as she walked along the trail that led to the bridge. The wind blew in warm gusts, as if coming from the mouth of a decorated animal. Her handheld recorder trembled between her fingers. The display showed 11:49 p.m. The girl had been walking for over an hour without encountering another human being. The last sign of civilization was a wooden departure sign, with the kanji almost faded, that said, "No further travel after dark." But she was shaken. I had always liked legends. I was a student of urban mythology and wanted to prove that the stories of the Bridge of the Last Whisper were nothing more than folkloric exaggerations. But now, alone, with the cold seeping through her clothes and her eyes stinging from the fog, she wasn't so sure. The bridge appeared like a long shadow between the trees, old, leaning, almost broken. It was as if it had been waiting for someone for centuries. Each creaking plank beneath her feet sounded like a rib being stepped on. Noriko activated the camera strapped to her chest and advanced. Around her, the silence was absolute. No crickets, no owls, no wind. Just her and the sound of the recorder. When she reached the middle of the bridge, she felt a pressure in her chest, a strange oppression, as if the wood itself were sucking the air. Then I heard it, a voice, subtle, quarrelsome, more whispered than spoken. Noriko, it wasn't possible. She turned, staring at the fog behind her. Nothing. But the voice repeated itself. Noriko, louder, closer. The recorder fell to the ground. The camera was still filming when she took a false step and fell to her knees. The wood didn't hurt. It was soft as raw meat. A bridge was pulsing. Noriko tried to stand up, but something pulled at her feet, like invisible roots attached to the soles of her shoes. The flashlight blinked once, twice, and went out. In the darkness, she heard more footsteps, many. As if collections of people were crossing the bridge at the same time, although nothing could be seen. She said, but the sound did not come out. Her scream died inside her throat as if swallowed by something. The camera shook, but it filmed. The video recorded the final seconds, a silhouette standing in front of her. No face, no movement. Just there, motionless, looking below as if waiting for her to approach. So the recording was short. In the last frame, the data shows the exact moment of Noriko's disappearance, 0003. The video file ends abruptly, as if the camera had been crushed from the inside. 3 weeks later, local loggers found the recorder still working, buried in the mud near where the bridge should have been. But the bridge was gone. There were no marks, no stakes, no trace of wood, as if it had never existed, but the recorder was still playing something. A constant whisper, repetitive. The same voice. Noriko, Noriko, Noriko. As the men listened, one by one, their throats began to burn. One of them disappeared at dusk, leaving no trace. The others said they had seen a young woman with long hair, among the trees, asking for help without moving her lips. Since then, no one has set foot in that part of the forest, because the legend now has a proof, and anyone who hears the last whisper is already on the path to the bridge. Even if it no longer exists. 2 weeks after the discovery of the recorder, Noriko's family was summoned by the police for a confidential meeting. At the Shizuoka Forensic Laboratory, sound technicians analyzed the audio captured by the device and concluded that the voice calling for Noriko was not human. The frequency varied irregularly, as if it were manipulated by layers of echoes, as if there was something speaking underground, through the wood, or even through the water. Noriko's mother, upon hearing the audio, went into a trance. She whispered disjointed words, a mixture of archaic Japanese and extinct dialects. At the hospital, she scribbled the same symbols that were on the old trail sign. One of the nurses said he saw a woman looking at the window with completely black eyes, as if something inside her had been consumed. When she came to, she simply asked, "She crossed, didn't she?" The case was closed. Officially, Noriko was considered missing in a densely wooded area with possible accidental causes. But the villagers knew the truth. They said that after her disappearance, the weather changed. Summer became cold. The forest grew darker. A group of Boy Scouts who camped 3 miles away reported hearing footsteps on wood every night, even though there was no bridge nearby. One of the children was missing for 47 minutes. When he was found, he was in shock with his feet soaked and his clothes covered in mud. The boy simply said, "She asked me to follow her. She showed me where the bridge is now." After that, no one could get another word out of him. And every night at the same time, he wakes up screaming, "Noriko is calling." The video files from the camera Noriko was using were partially recovered by a digital restoration specialist. In one of the reconstructed images, it was possible to see the young man's face reflected in the lens. Behind her, for less than a second, a figure moves, but does not walk. It creeps like a liquid shadow, always close to the wood. In one of the frozen frames, the analysts swear that it is possible to see a different bridge behind her. It was not made of wood, but of bones, and the cables were made of human hair. The expert decided to continue with the analysis. He said that each time he watched the video, he began to hear noises inside the house, even with everything turned off. Sounds of boards breaking, drops falling on the floor, a sound of water dripping from a ceiling that was dry. The authorities sealed off access to the trail with barriers and fences, but residents swore that when the fog descends, the signs disappear and the path appears again, as if the forest, alive and conscious, chooses who can see it. In a recent report, a hiker posted on internet forums that he came across a bridge in the middle of nowhere with a girl standing in the middle of it. He said she was soaking wet, her face covered in black hair. When he moved, she whispered her own name, Noriko. The man ran, but he claims that since that day, the bridge appears in his dreams, always at midnight, always waiting. And with each new dream, it is closer. The Bridge of the Last Whisper is now a living legend. It no longer needs a location, nor a physical structure. It exists in the voices that call to you when the wind blows. That is not what you hear when you step on old wood. There is no music that echoes inside your house while you sleep. A female voice, low, constant, whispering your name very slowly. And if one day you hear that, don't look back, because the bridge may no longer be in Japan. It may be right where you are now, waiting for you to cross. The village of Czarna Śmierć in southern Poland has never appeared on modern maps. It officially disappeared during World War II when a Soviet bombing raid wiped out the entire community. But the truth is different. In 1938, a reporter from Krakow named Emil Gorski set out on a mission to investigate strange reports of a village where no one ever died. It was an isolated village, nestled between dense forests and mist-covered hills. For centuries, Czarna Śmierć had no burials, no funerals, no crosses, no coffins, and the strangest thing, no one had left it. Everyone who was born, lived and died there had been forgotten by the world. Emil found the place after 3 days of walking. He was guided by a father who warned, "What you are about to see should not be told, because not everything that lives needs a heart." Upon arriving, Emil noticed the absence of natural children. No birds, no insects, no wind. Only houses made of black wood and windows always closed. The residents do not know him. They just stared, fixed with whitened eyes, as if they could no longer see with their eyesight but with something else. Emil was taken in by a woman who took him in without saying a word. At night, he played drums coming from the basement, a constant tribal rhythm, almost hypnotic. The journalist went down, armed with a flashlight and his notebook. In the basement, I found a stone room with a symbol carved in the center, a circle of animal skulls arranged in a spiral. In the corner, a child sat motionless, staring at the wall. When he moved in, she turned her face and said, "You will not leave here either." That was the first and last time anyone saw Emil. His diary files were found 7 years later, in an abandoned monastery in northern Germany. The notebook mentioned a sect known as the Guardians of the Void, who lived beneath the ground of Czarna Śmierć. These beings were human only in appearance. Inside, they were hollow. They had no organs or blood, only skin, bones, and a black substance described as living oil that oozed when exposed to sunlight. They were neither born nor died. They simply multiplied. The bodies were buried for 7 days and then dug up to the sound of drums when they returned as dwellers in silence. Emil discovered that the village had made pacts with ancient forces that predated Christianity, even predating the Celts, forces that offered eternity in exchange for the absence of a soul. At the end of the diary, there is a note written in shaky handwriting. They want to leave. They have made me a part. I no longer feel cold, I no longer hunger. I hear the drums even when I'm awake. After this last sentence, the ink turns into black stains that cover half of the following pages. Scientists who analyzed the material concluded that the liquid substance was not ordinary paint, but an unidentified organic substance with corrosive properties that emitted a faint humming sound when heated. The diary was sealed by the military authorities and removed from the public archives. The village was never found again. Satellites flying over the area show a dark patch among the trees where no GPS system works. Aircraft avoid the airspace. Drones lose signal, and people trying to find Zana Śmierć, some without leaving a trace. The mystery was almost forgotten until a group of urban explorers in 2006 found an entrance to a catacomb in the Polish forest. Inside were human bones, hollow inside as if carved, and at the center of the encryption an old camera. The last video recorded shows a man shouting in Polish, "The drums are inside me," before the image fades into total darkness. The sound continued for 13 minutes, drums and rhythmic breathing. Today it is believed that Zana Śmierć was not destroyed. It simply changed shape. And it lives in the shadows, in a block of some place where silence reigns. Where no one dies and where everyone who enters and returns but without a voice, without a soul. Only with the hum of the drum inside its chest, marking the rhythm of the emptiness that inhabits it. In the months following the discovery of cryptography, a series of events began to haunt southern Poland. Farmers reported that their fields were turned over, with perfect holes spiraling through the middle of the crops, and in each hole what looked like human teeth, lined up as if they needed to be planted. One of the farmers disappeared after reporting hearing underground drumming beneath his house in the early hours of the morning. When neighbors went to investigate, they found only his clothes folded on his bed, and on the floor, a black liquid that even today, even when stored in sealed jars, moves slightly on its own. Experts sent from Warsaw said it was organic residue with the property of electromagnetic self-activity, but no explanation was given publicly. The drumming was heard by others, and not just in Zana Śmierć. A group of archaeology students, intrigued by the reports, decided to organize a clandestine expedition in 2010. They followed trails of ancient records, 17th century maps and symbols found in ruins in the region. In a video posted online before they disappear, one of the students points to a hill and whispers, "This is it. We hear the thumping coming from below." At the end of the video, the camera drops to the ground, and throughout it, a low, guttural chorus can be heard in a language that resembles no other known language. The footage was removed from the internet 3 days later. The profiles of those involved disappeared. Not even academic records of them could be found. It was as if they had ceased to exist. The case gained attention from alternative media, and a theory was floated among occult forums. Zana Śmierć was never an ordinary village. It was a portal, a place where the veil between the physical world and a lower layer of reality had been torn. These isolated people had surrendered themselves to the cycle of undeath, to remain as guardians, to prevent anything from leaving. But over time the seals weakened, the community's faith was corrupted, and now the void that pulsed beneath them seeks new doors to enter our world. One of those doors would be sound. The drums. They are not heard. They are summoned. Every person who listens, speaks, records, or shares amplifies the influence of that which sleeps beneath the earth. A nameless thing. The thing that fills the silence with echoes of empty flesh. A final curious recording emerged in 2022, coming from a woman in the city of Gdynia. She recorded an audio of her own son, just 3 years old, saying, "Mommy, the black man called Ami. He lives in the ground. He wants me to dance." In the background of the audio, there is a rhythmic sound, spaced beats. And at the end, before the file abruptly cuts off, the child whispers, "They are coming from the dark." The woman disappeared the following week, leaving only her cell phone on, with the audio repeating on a loop. Those who listen for more than 3 minutes report dizziness, loss of recent memory, and an intense feeling of being observed. The archive was trained, and it was discovered that the sound of the drum has a wave pattern that should not be possible within human frequencies, a kind of ancient code, hidden in the pulse of the earth itself. Today, the recommendation among researchers and curious people is clear. If you are in absolute silence and hear 3 dry beats, do not respond. Do not try to record. Do not share. And above all, do not look for the source. Because Jana Śmierć is no longer trapped in Poland. She spreads through the cracks of the world, where the soil is softer and faith is more fragile. The drums do not stop. They just wait for you to listen. And when you do, you too will become a guardian, from the inside out, with an empty chest and white eyes ready for the next cycle, ready to carry the sound of emptiness. In 1984, a Canadian filmmaker named Félix Dubois traveled to the interior of Japan in search of inspiration for his new project. Fascinated by Eastern folklore, he spoke of a forgotten village in the mountains of Yamanashi, where the residents avoided using mirrors. According to what they said, the reflection of that village was unreliable. There, it was not uncommon for people to see movements that their bodies did not make, expressions that they did not remember feeling. The village, called Kagamimura, literally the village of mirrors, had been abandoned for almost 100 years, after an unexplained epidemic that drove its inhabitants to collective madness. It is said that it all started when a Buddhist monk brought an ancient bronze mirror found in a forgotten imperial tomb. From that moment on, no one slept properly, and some began to disappear from their own reflection. Felix, a skeptic by nature, decided to document the journey. He filmed the winding road to Kagamimura, a lush green dense that seemed to block the path behind him, and the torii gate that marked the entrance to the village, already fallen and covered in moss. The place was like a time capsule, intact. Houses, dolls on the tables, folded futons. But there was no living soul. Only silence and a feeling that something was watching him at every step. In the center of the village there was a temple with a stone altar and a single offering, a mirror covered in a dark red cloth. Felix removed the cloth, and then the end began. The reflection did not show the temple. It showed a room lit by candles with walls covered in distorted human faces, all motionless and except one. The reflection looked back at him, but it did not blink, it did not breathe. And so I invited him. In the following days, Felix began to exhibit strange behavior. First, his camera began to record images even when it was turned off. Always the same seconds, his reflection in front of the mirror, but with a woman behind. It, dressed in white and with her hair covering her face, standing still motionless. Later, tape recordings of speeches he never said emerged, in archaic Japanese but pronounced perfectly. Felix began writing in ideograms without having practiced the language. Residents of the nearest town reported that he had been seen walking around Kagamimura at night, even when he was locked in his room. And a child just 7 years old assigned to the television and told his mother, "The man on the screen is trapped." He asked me for help, but he no longer has eyes. The only tape recovered from the expedition, now hidden in a private collection, shows Dubois' last moments. He walks through the temple with the camera in his hand, breathing heavily. In Japanese, he murmurs, "He saw me. He wants to get out." The camera turns to the mirror, and for a split second, Felix can be seen on the other side, screaming, scratching at the glass, while his real body remains motionless. The woman in white walks behind him, enters his skin as if she was smoke, and then everything goes black. The image freezes. The reflection flickers, and sorry again, no body was found, just a camera. The mirror is gone. Years later, in 1999, a Japanese teenager published a blog where she reported having bought an antique mirror at an antiques fair. She said that from then on, whenever she cried in front of it, her reflection would smile. Her parents thought the stories were absurd until one day she disappeared. The security camera of the store across the street recorded her reflection leaving the house, while the mirror in her room was intact. Since then, rumors about the Kagami mirror have spread on occult forums on the dark web. They say that the mirror is not an object but a rift, a kind of reverse prison where souls enter by will or carelessness, and the entities that were there take their place. Today, there is a name whispered among the older monks of Yamanashi: Kagami no Kami, the god of the reflection. He is not worshipped, he is feared. And this is where, if you stare at your reflection for too long without blinking and feel the urge to smile for no reason, you are no longer you, because the one on the other side doesn't just want to watch. It wants to change places. And when it does, you will keep smiling even if inside you are screaming, and no one will hear, because you are trapped in the cold surface of a glass, where all you can do is watch. 3 months after the disappearance of the young Japanese woman, similar reports emerged from different parts of the world. In Buenos Aires, a 70-year-old woman was found sitting in front of an old mirror, completely still, eyes wide open, smile begging. Paramedics said she was alive, but in a state of deep catatonia. When they tried to move her, she began to laugh, in a voice that did not correspond to her age. She was younger, higher-pitched, almost childish. In the mirror in front of her, the reflection in front of her was not laughing. It was still, eyes fixed, mouth closed, as if the old woman and the image had switched roles, but the reflection refused to cooperate with the lie. The case was hushed up by the Argentine police, but a nurse recorded a secret audio describing a moment when she entered the patient's room alone. She reported that the reflection of the woman began to move on its own, even though her body was inert. It gesticulated, banged on the glass with its fists, tried to write something in the air. When the nurse moved out, she swore she heard a voice whispering in Brazilian Portuguese from the mirror, "He is using me. This body is not mine. Please." The nurse never returned to the hospital. Her apartment was found empty, with no signs of forced entry, but the bathroom mirror had been covered with wet cement. In the center was an inscription, "Closed, but not sealed." Experts in supernatural predictions have drawn connections between these cases and a series of 19th century accounts from East Prussia. A diary recovered from a ruined mansion noted that the surface of the mirror is but the skin of time, and what crawls beneath it knows no mercy from the light. The accounts told of children who refused to look at themselves in the mirror, saying that someone inside wanted to play with them, and that when they were finally forced to look at their reflection, they changed. They stopped talking, they stopped eating, and we spent hours in front of the glass as if receiving instructions. Today, some secret sects revere the reflection as an entity. They call it the other self. For these groups, mirrors are not ordinary objects, but portals, screens to an adjacent universe where what they call mirrored truth resides. They say that all the versions of ourselves that we hide, our shadows, our fears, our deepest desires, take shape on the other side, and that, one day, all these versions will come to claim their place. It starts with smiles at the wrong time, then with reflections that blinked at the wrong moment, until one day you wake up and the reflection is still lying there. And then, my friend, it's too late. That's why the Japanese monk's advice remains: never sleep with a mirror facing you. Never look into your own eyes for too long through a reflection. And above all, never under any circumstances smile if you don't feel like it. Because if your reflection smiles and you don't, then someone else is about to leave and you disappear forever. Not out of fear, but out of respect. It is not about a spirit, nor a monster, but something much older, more rooted in the earth. They call her Ankailich, which means the old woman in Gaelic. Her story is marked by voices and furtive glances, never fully told, but always felt. And as in many ancient legends, it begins with a warning: never, ever enter the forest at night, because if you do, something will take you inside, something that is already there, waiting. The Cailleach is more than an entity. She is a force that shapes the landscapes, that changes the climate, and that dictates the rhythm of the seasons. During the winter, she walks through the forest, covering everything with a layer of ice and snow. In the summer, she disappears, but leaves invisible marks on the trees, the ground, and even the stones. According to her heirs, she is the guardian of the ancient bloodlines, a sort of guardian of the balance of nature, and as such, those who dare cross her border without her permission pay a price. The problem is that no one knows exactly what that price is until it is too late. The first recorded story about the Cailleach dates back to 1823, when a group of hunters ventured into the forest to explore a recently discovered area where rare animals were said to be seen. No one else in the village had dared to approach that place, but the hunters were seeking a glory that no one else had the courage to attempt. They never returned. Only one of them, a young man of 22, was found 3 days later, wandering around the edge of the forest, visibly disoriented and muttering incomprehensible words. He was taken to the village, but nothing made sense of his story. He spoke of a tall woman with long white hair and a cloak that seemed to be made of night itself. With every step, the trees whispered her name. And then he spoke of the moment. He had wandered away from the others, following the sounds of falling leaves, as if he were being called until he came to a clearing where a figure, the Cailleach, stood, her eyes fixed on him. He fled, but the trees tried to move and the branches formed a circle around him. That was when he looked up and saw through the clouds the shape of a huge bird. The bird, like a giant shadow, swooped down on him and touched him with its talons. He passed out. The boy never recovered from his delusions. He spent the next few days talking about her gaze, how she had marked him, how every night he would see the branches of the trees reaching out to his window, as if they were reaching for him. The village doctor diagnosed him with post-traumatic stress disorder, but the boy never stopped claiming that once he had seen the reflection of his own face in the surface of the lake. But if something was wrong, her eyes were different, deeper, darker. He never explained what he had actually seen, but he claimed that somehow the spirit of the Cailleach had taken over. Until, a month later, the young man disappeared without a trace. The hunter's story soon became a warning. If you hear the wind singing through the trees in the forest in the dead of night, never follow it. If you hear footsteps behind you as you walk, don't look back, because the Cailleach rides on the wind. And when she finds you, you will never be the same. Some say she stole the souls of those who lost themselves in her forest, turning them into shadows that wander restlessly. Others believe she guards these spirits until spring comes, when they are released to dance with the wind, like dry leaves in autumn. In 1957, a young visitor, an anthropologist, ventured alone into the forest, seeking to unravel the mystery behind the legend. She was last seen on the shore of the lake where the young hunter had his vision. The villagers searched for weeks, but she was never found. However, his diary was found inside a hollow tree, with the last words frantically written, "I saw the bird and it saw me too." The sightings of giant birds in the region have never ceased. Sometimes during the winter months, something resembling a large black crow can be seen crossing the sky in absolute silence, disappearing into the horizon as if it were part of the night itself. But those who dare to look closer swear that they will never be able to erase from their memory the shadows that hover behind this bird. These are no ordinary shadows. They have eyes. Eyes that reflect emptiness. The emptiness of something that is waiting. And if you are not paying attention, it may be waiting for you. In 1984, a group of young tourists looking for an authentic experience of rural Scotland decided to camp near the ancient loch where a young anthropologist had disappeared. They did not believe in stories of ghosts or ancient entities, but they thought it would be a perfect opportunity to document an adventure in the Scottish Highlands. Armed with cameras and flashlights, they headed into the forest at dusk, laughing and joking, mocking the old legends of the village. On the second night, a thick fog quickly formed, covering the countryside and making visibility almost non-existent. One of the young men, Tommy, was the first to notice something strange. He said he heard a peculiar sound, as if the wind was singing through the trees, but the melody was unlike anything he had ever heard before. He tried to alert his friends, but when he turned around, he found that they had all disappeared. In desperation, he ran through the forest calling out his friends' names, but the only answer was the echo of his own voice. For hours he walked through the terrain, the branches of the trees beating against his body, as if the forest itself were trying to stop him. He began to hear footsteps, heavy, slow, as if someone or something was approaching him. But he could see nothing beyond the thick fog. When he finally turned to flee, he saw a human figure with long white hair standing in front of him. He was paralyzed by fear, unable to move, as the figure seemed to slowly approach. With a muffled cry, Tommy fell to his knees. The image of the woman, with eyes as dark and deep as the night, was right before him. Her eyes did not blink, showed no emotion. They simply watched with an intensity that made him feel as if he were being consumed by something much larger than the forest itself. Tommy then realized that it was not she who was watching him, but something inside her, something moving, something alive, as if he were standing before a creature in perfect harmony with the darkness. Before I could react, the sound of a huge bird, its wings beating like thunder, echoed through the sky. The woman's figure raised its arms as if in reverence to the bird's presence. At that moment, Tommy caught a glimpse of the great shadow flying over the forest, its silhouette eclipsing the full moon. The fog grew even thicker, enveloping the young man, and he felt a pressure on his chest, as if he were being dragged into an abyss. The last thing he saw was the reflection of his own eyes in the lake, eyes that were no longer his. The lake, which had once reflected the image of the sky, now showed only a deep emptiness, an echo of a soul that had been taken from there. In the end, the tourists were never found again, and instead, the locals began to notice something strange. Large black-feathered birds began to be seen frequently, flying in circles over the forest. The branches, previously quiet, began to move erratically as if the trees were breathing alive. Years passed, and in 1999, a new group of mystery hunters decided to investigate the disappearances, armed with modern equipment and an immense desire to expose the legends as mere superstitions. They camped in the same place, surrounded by dense fog, with cameras and recorders to capture any anomalies. When night fell, they did not hear the wind singing, but something much deeper, a low roar coming from the direction of the forest. They tried to film it, but the cameras failed one by one. In their panic, they heard loud and clear the snapping of branches, a sound that sounded like the growth of something massive, the kind of sound that precedes the presence of something very ancient. In the middle of the night, a young woman in the group, Clara, reported seeing a figure with white hair and a cloak made of dry leaves, who approached them without making a sound. She described the being as a specter, a blurry image but with lively eyes that watched her in an almost possessive way. When she tried to call out to the others, she noticed that she could not move her feet. She was trapped, as if the earth itself had been consumed. Panic took hold of the group. They began to run aimlessly, but the sound of the great wings beating them, cutting through the wind and leaving a trail of shadows behind each of them. Somehow, Clara managed to escape, but the experience left its mark. Her account was the last to be found. The other members of the group were never found. In 2005, a team of archaeologists exploring the region found remains of human bones around the lake, still shrouded in dense vegetation. Among the bones were ancient inscriptions made on stones that dated back more than 1,000 years. These were symbols that represented an entity known as Ankailak, the guardian of the forest's balance. She, they say, never lingered, never left. She is the earth, she is nature. And those who enter the forest without respect are simply part of her cycle. Today, the villagers who have survived the passage of time and wind know that the forest has its own government. The Elder, as she is called, walks to the rhythm of the seasons. And when winter comes, no one dares to cross the invisible line between the village and the forest. Not because they fear the legend, but because they know, in a silent way, that the trees and the winds hold something that no one should know. Something that is waiting, silently, for everyone to return to the land.